today to make a statement about two concepts, blasphemy on one hand and free speech on the other. And I kind of want to treat them, well, they are of course related, but I would like to kind of stress more on each of them in sort of the two portions of very short, what I would say. So blasphemy, if understood broadly, would be an affront to divinity, divinity broadly defined. And one has to realize that there are very few faiths which do not finally believe that their worldview, so to say, is superior to the other. That's one of the fundamental tenets of most religions, if we look at that. And what that intrinsically entails is denigrating the other divinities. Okay? So it's intrinsically blasphemous, so to say. So proselytization per se is a blasphemous act when applied to divinity as such and not a particular god or gods. Right? So we have to keep in mind this idea of when people want the right to propagate a religion, okay, and not religiosity in general, they have blasphemy in mind against someone. Okay? So if I am, let's say a Christian and I want a Muslim to turn to Christianity, I am actually calling that person to give up his belief in Muhammad being the last prophet. And that is blasphemous, broadly defined. Right? So we have to actually broaden the ambit in the sense that why then certain groups have the right to blaspheme under the garb of proselytization while others don't, right? It should be an equal opportunity space in that sense, right? If you can denounce all other gods but yours, then what everybody else is asking is to just add one more to it. And then you have every one of us. So that's what we are talking about here, right? That blasphemy, and which takes us to the next idea of free speech. Proselytization is part of free speech. Okay? That you want to want to influence other people by your ideas, and you think it's a better idea, and then you want to, without coercion, I think it's perfectly fine. And it's under that protection of propagation of religion, or propagation of the right to blaspheme against others, is the right to blaspheme against you is enshrined. But they are intrinsically bound up. We have to be careful. So for example, if we turn to recent events, right? There has been violence in what is called the Muslim world. And I do not like that term in the sense that it, first of all, denies diversity within Islam. It denies diversity, faith and humanist diversity in that area. It denies the diversity that has historically been in those areas. So it is just a wrong term in many, many ways, or a Christian world or Hindu world or whatever. It just denies what is ever changing and ever dynamic parts of the world. But let's dwell on that. There has been a lot of denunciation of the violence that has followed. But let me just be a little careful here. Denunciation is easy. Denunciation is easy, especially when the brickbats that are happening are not falling on our bodies. Okay? For example, free speech, let's say in many of the areas where these violence have happened, free speech has always been seriously curtailed for many, many people working for basic rights in those areas forever, and they have nothing to do with religion. The fact that one cannot be selective about attention to only fundamentalist violence and look away when people's basic rights are being denied in terms of freedom of speech for every other thing. So if you want food, you are dispersed, and you're protesting, you're dispersed. That is a curbing of freedom of speech. It is not limited to questions of faith and counterfaith. So while we express solidarity with the idea of freedom of speech, I think the idea of freedom of speech has to be expanded to all forms of freedom of speech and not held into a, divinity, anti-divinity binary. So that's what I have to say. Okay.